Eli Carter lived on the far edge of the small frontier town, in a place where the land stretched out wide and open. He liked it that way. He enjoyed the quiet, the soft sounds of wind passing through the dry grass, and the slow rhythm of the days. Most people in town knew his name, but few knew anything about him. They called him the quiet cowboy, or sometimes the lonely one, because he rarely spoke unless he had to. He spent most of his time caring for his horses, fixing tools, or riding across the empty fields where he felt most at peace. Eli was not unfriendly, he simply did not know how to talk much. Life had not been easy for him, and after losing his family to a harsh winter years ago, he learned to keep his feelings tucked away like old letters he no longer opened. People in town sometimes made guesses about him. Some said he was shy. Others said he preferred animals to people. Nobody knew the real reason he avoided crowds or why he always looked like he was half lost in thought. Only Eli knew, and he kept those memories to himself. One warm afternoon, Eli rode into town to buy supplies. It was supposed to be a quick trip, pick up flour, nails, and a new rope, and then return to his quiet home. But when he reached the town square, he found a large crowd gathered around a wooden platform. People were talking loudly, pushing closer, trying to get a better look. Eli did not like crowds, but curiosity pulled him forward. He tied his horse near the well and walked toward the noise. The local sheriff stood on the platform. He was speaking to the crowd, explaining something Eli could only half hear. Beside the sheriff were several individuals who had been brought into town earlier that morning. People whispered that they had been found during a recent search near the hills. They did not seem dangerous or angry, mostly tired, mostly silent. Among them stood a young Apache girl, small and thin, who looked no older than her late teens. She had long dark hair, braided neatly, and her eyes were steady, even though her face showed signs of worry. Eli did not like the scene. It made him uneasy. The air felt heavy with misunderstanding. He could see the girl did not want to be there, and he could tell she was trying hard to stay calm. The sheriff announced that people could offer payment to take responsibility for the individuals, promising they would be treated fairly and cared for. But the crowd looked unsure. Nobody stepped forward. Some people just stared, some whispered, others walked away. The young Apache girl stood alone, her hands folded in front of her, her expression still and quiet. Everyone watched her, yet no one acted. Eli noticed something in her eyes, a deep tiredness, but also strength. She was not weak, not helpless. She was simply caught somewhere she did not belong, surrounded by people who did not understand her. The sheriff tried again, lowering the amount to encourage anyone to step forward. $1, he said, sounding impatient. It seemed he only wanted to move on with his day. Still, no one volunteered. Eli felt a strange pull in his chest. He did not know the girl. He did not know her story. He had no plan, no good reason to get involved. Yet something inside him pushed him toward the platform. Maybe it was the way she stood so bravely, or the way the crowd avoided her as if she were something they could not understand. Maybe it was because Eli himself knew what it felt like to stand alone, wishing for just a little kindness. Before he could talk himself out of it, he spoke up. "I'll take responsibility," he said quietly. The sheriff blinked at him, surprised to see the quiet cowboy stepping forward. $1? Then, the sheriff replied. Eli reached into his coat, pulled out a single coin, and handed it over. The sheriff nodded and stepped aside, making way for the girl to join Eli. When she walked toward him, she moved carefully, as though unsure what kind of person he was. He did not try to touch her or rush her. He simply held her gaze for a moment and then stepped aside to let her walk freely beside him. The crowd watched with curious eyes, whispering to each other, as Eli guided her toward his horse. Eli did not know what to say. Words did not come easily to him, and he did not want to make her uncomfortable. He simply pointed toward his horse, then toward the open road leading away from town. The girl looked at him for a long moment. Her expression was hard to read, part confusion, part caution, and maybe a soft hint of relief. Finally, she nodded. Eli helped her settle onto the horse, keeping a respectful distance. Once she was ready, he climbed up behind her, careful not to crowd her. The horse moved slowly at first, as if sensing the delicate situation, and then walked steadily down the dusty road toward the ranch. The ride home was quiet, but not unpleasant. The girl sat very straight, her eyes watching everything. The sky, the ground, the distant hills. Eli noticed how alert she was, how closely she paid attention to every sound and movement. She seemed to memorize the land as they passed through it, as though she needed to hold the picture in her mind. When they reached his small ranch, Eli brought the horse to a stop. The girl slid down easily, landing lightly on her feet. She did not look frightened, only unsure of what would happen next. Eli pointed toward the cabin, then gently tapped his chest. "Eli," he said, giving her his name in the simplest way he knew. The girl hesitated, then touched her hand to her heart. Her voice was calm, almost musical, and Eli was relieved to finally know her name. He nodded respectfully. He sensed she did not want too many questions, and he respected that. He guided her toward the cabin and stopped before stepping inside, letting her choose what she wanted to do. She took a few careful breaths and entered on her own, looking around quietly. The cabin was small but warm. A wooden table stood near the window. A single bed sat against the back wall. A few blankets were folded neatly on a chair. Ayanna took in everything, with thoughtful eyes. She did not touch anything, but Eli could tell she was trying to understand this new place. He motioned toward the table where a loaf of bread and a jug of water sat. She hesitated, then accepted the offer, and took a small sip. She seemed hungry but did not eat much, as though waiting to see if she could trust him fully. Eli did not want to overwhelm her. He stepped outside, giving her space to breathe, and let her explore the room quietly. He worked on his chores, feeding the horses and checking the fences, but his mind kept drifting back to the cabin. He wondered what she was thinking. He wondered if she felt safe. He wondered if he had done the right thing. When evening came, he brought an extra blanket to the cabin and set it near the bed. He motioned again, letting her choose where she wanted to sleep. Ayanna looked at the bed, then at the floor, then carefully placed the blanket near the corner of the room where she could see both the door and the window. Eli did not question her choice. He simply nodded and stepped outside again to let her rest. The first night passed quietly. The ranch was peaceful, and the sound of crickets filled the air. Eli sat by the porch, watching the moon rise, thinking about how unexpected the day had been. He had arrived in town alone, as he always did, and returned with someone he hardly knew, someone who now trusted him enough to sleep under his roof. It was a strange feeling, but not unwelcome. Even though they had spoken only a few words, Eli sensed that Ayanna carried a quiet strength and a deep story he did not yet understand. He did not know why she had been so alone in the town square, or why she had looked at the horizon as if she were searching for something far beyond his ranch. But he felt sure of one thing: her arrival was going to change his life in ways he could not yet imagine. And though he did not know it, Ayanna carried a secret that would soon change everything. The morning sun rose slowly over Eli's ranch, spreading a warm golden light across the open fields. Eli stepped outside early, as he always did, ready to start his chores. But today felt different. He kept glancing toward the cabin window, wondering if Ayanna was awake and how she was feeling in this new place. Inside the cabin, Ayanna had woken before dawn. She sat quietly in the corner where she had chosen to sleep, her blanket neatly folded beside her. She listened to the sounds of the ranch, the soft clucking of hens, the distant whinny of horses, and the gentle steps of Eli moving about outside. Everything was new, yet the early morning calm reminded her of home. of mornings she once spent listening to her own people begin their day. Ayanna moved silently, studying the cabin again, noticing details she had missed the night before. The simple carvings Eli had made in the wooden table, the faded drawings of horses pinned to the wall, the neat row of tools hanging by the door. It was clear that Eli lived a quiet but orderly life, full of routine and care. When she stepped outside, Eli looked up, surprised to see her awake so early. She stood with her hands gently folded, her eyes calm but alert, watching the land as though trying to understand where she now belonged. Eli gave a small nod to greet her. He did not speak much, worried that too many words might make her uneasy. Instead, he pointed toward a bucket of fresh water near the porch. Ayanna understood and walked over to wash her face. The cold water woke her fully, and she felt a little more grounded. Eli prepared a small breakfast: bread, a bit of fruit, and warm tea made from herbs he grew in a tiny garden behind the cabin. When he set the food on the table, Ayanna hesitated before sitting down. She took only small bites, as if being careful not to take more than she needed. Eli noticed this and gently pushed more food toward her. But still, she ate lightly. After breakfast, Eli headed toward the stables. Ayanna followed him at a short distance, curious but cautious. She watched him lift the wooden gate, step inside, and start brushing one of the horses. The way he handled the animal was careful and patient, his movements slow and calm. Eli noticed her watching and stepped aside, giving her room if she wanted to come closer. Ayanna paused, then slowly walked toward the stable. When she reached the open gate, she stopped again, waiting for a signal. Eli nodded softly, giving her permission to enter. Ayanna moved closer to the horse, keeping her hand steady and open. The horse sniffed her hand, then gently leaned its head toward her. She smiled a small, almost hidden smile and began brushing the horse's coat with careful strokes. Eli watched silently, impressed by the gentle confidence she showed with the animal. She knew horses well, maybe even better than he did. For a moment, Eli forgot that she was a stranger in his home. In that moment, she looked like she belonged on the ranch, standing in the soft morning light, brushing the horse as if she had done so all her life. Hours passed calmly. Eli worked on repairing a broken fence, and Ayanna stayed near the horses, occasionally watching him, occasionally walking around the ranch as though mapping each corner in her mind. She did not wander far, but she always kept an eye on the paths leading away from the ranch, as if she were waiting for something or someone. Eli noticed this, though he said nothing. As the sun climbed higher, the air grew warmer. Ayanna moved toward the shade of an old tree beside the barn. She sat there for a long while, her eyes drifting between the sky and the hills in the distance. Eli could see she was thinking deeply, though he couldn't guess what was on her mind. Later that afternoon, Eli brought out a bucket of water to wash off the dust from his work. While he poured some water over his hands, Ayanna approached him quietly. She pointed at the wooden fence he had been working on, then pointed at herself, then at the tools lying on the ground. She was asking if she could help. Eli blinked in surprise. Most visitors or strangers would stay inside and avoid hard work, but Ayanna wanted to assist. He handed her a small hammer and a set of nails. She took them carefully, testing the weight of the hammer before following Eli to the fence post. Together, they worked in quiet harmony. Though she moved slowly at first, she soon grew more confident, tapping the nails gently into place. Eli corrected her grip once, but always kept a respectful distance. Working side by side made the afternoon feel lighter. Neither spoke, but something warm and steady grew between them, an understanding built not from words, but from simple actions and shared effort. When they finished the repair, Ayanna stepped back and looked at their work. She gave a small nod, the kind that meant she approved. Eli nodded back, feeling a quiet sense of pride not in the fence, but in the comfortable silence they had managed to build together. As the day cooled, Ayanna began exploring the ranch again. She walked along the edge of the fields, her steps soft and measured. Sometimes she knelt to touch the soil. Sometimes she examined small plants or rocks. Eli watched from a distance, curious about her habits. She moved with purpose, as though studying the land for reasons he did not yet understand. Near sunset, something strange happened. Eli stepped into the barn to check on his horse, but when he came back out, Ayanna was gone. She wasn't in the cabin, wasn't by the fence, wasn't near the water trough, and wasn't sitting under the tree where she had rested earlier. Eli's heart beat faster, not with fear, but with worry. He knew she did not owe him anything. She was free to leave whenever she wished, but he hoped she was safe. He walked around the ranch, searching quietly. Just as he was about to check the back field, he saw her emerging from behind a line of tall bushes near the creek. Her steps were careful, and she looked around as she moved, making sure no one had followed her. When she saw Eli watching, her expression tightened for a moment. Not with anger, more like concern at being noticed. She lowered her gaze slightly, as though trying to hide whatever she had been doing. Eli didn't ask questions. He simply gave her a gentle nod, letting her know that she was free to come and go as she wished. She returned the nod, though her eyes held something he couldn't quite read, something she was keeping deep inside, something she was not ready to share. Later that evening, as they prepared dinner, Ayanna accidentally bumped into a small clay pot sitting on the shelf. It fell to the floor and cracked. She froze, her eyes wide, clearly upset at breaking something that wasn't hers. Eli knelt, picking up the pieces without a hint of irritation. He smiled softly to show her it was all right. Ayanna relaxed slightly, letting out a breath she had been holding. The simple moment taught her something important. Eli was not someone who reacted with anger or impatience. His calmness made her trust him a little more. After dinner, Ayanna took her blanket again and settled in the same corner as the night before. She sat with her back against the wall, her eyes facing the door and window. Eli noticed her sleeping posture showed caution, not fear. She was protecting herself in her own way. Before going to sleep, Eli stepped outside. The night sky was filled with stars, brighter than any lantern. He stood under them quietly, thinking about the girl inside his cabin. He wondered where she came from, what stories she carried, and why she had looked so deeply into the horizon earlier that day. Inside the cabin, Ayanna lay awake for a long time. Her eyes stayed open, listening, waiting. She thought about her people, the hills she knew so well, and the quiet cowboy who had shown her nothing but gentle patience. She knew he sensed she was hiding something, and he was right. For while Eli slept without knowing it, Ayanna had begun leaving small signs, tiny marks hidden in the land, signals only her people would recognize. She was watching the hills not just out of curiosity, but with hope. Hope that someone would see her signs. Hope that someone she trusted would come. And though Eli did not know it, the peaceful days on the ranch were only the beginning of something much bigger. The days passed quietly on Eli's ranch. Each sunrise painted the sky with soft colors, and each sunset wrapped the land in warm shadows. Ayanna slowly became a part of this peaceful routine, though she still carried a quiet watchfulness deep inside her. She helped with chores, cared for the horses, and walked around the land as though learning every detail. Eli had grown used to her presence. The silence between them was no longer uncomfortable, it felt natural, like the soft breeze that moved through the fields. But though Ayanna seemed calm, there was something in her eyes that never left a gentle but constant alertness, as though she were listening to something far away. Eli noticed it more each day, but he didn't push for answers. He believed that when she was ready, she would speak. Until then, he offered kindness through small actions, leaving extra water by the door, sharing fresh bread, and giving her space when she needed it. One afternoon, while Eli was mending a saddle strap, Ayanna stood near the corral, her hand resting on the wooden rail. She stared into the open distance, her gaze fixed on the hills beyond the creek. Her expression was calm but thoughtful. Eli saw her from the barn and paused, wondering again what she saw out there that he could not. That evening, after chores, Ayanna disappeared again. It wasn't unusual by then. Every day, for a short time, she slipped away near dusk. She didn't run far. Eli knew she stayed close to the ranch because she always returned before night fully settled. Still, her disappearances stayed in his mind like a small, unanswered question. This time, something in Eli nudged him to follow. Not to spy, not to control, but to understand. He waited a few minutes, letting her get ahead so she wouldn't feel pressured. Then he walked quietly toward the creek, careful not to make noise. The sky was dimming, the air cool and gentle. Birds sang their last songs of the day as the light faded. He expected to find Ayanna sitting by the water or walking among the trees. But when he reached the creek, she wasn't there. Instead, he saw a faint movement higher up, near the rocks above the water. Ayanna was climbing the small rise, her steps soft, her posture steady. Eli stayed back, not wanting to startle her. He watched her reach the top and disappear behind a cluster of stones. He took a slow breath and followed a little closer. When he reached the base of the hill, he heard something, a quiet murmur. Not loud, not sharp, just soft voices blending with the wind. Eli hesitated. He was not used to being near groups of people, much less ones he didn't know. But curiosity pulled him forward. He moved up the hill carefully, staying hidden behind the rocks. When he reached a small opening near the top, he stopped. Ayanna was not alone. Two figures stood near her, Apache scouts, wearing simple, earth-colored clothing that blended with the land. They stood a few feet away, speaking in voices so soft they barely rose above a whisper. Ayanna spoke with them, her tone gentle but confident. She did not look afraid. In fact, she looked completely at ease. Eli felt a mix of surprise and relief. She wasn't in danger. She wasn't distressed. She was meeting people she trusted. He watched as Ayanna turned slightly, her eyes scanning the land below as though checking for something. Then her gaze drifted downward, straight toward where Eli was hiding. For a moment, Eli froze. Ayanna's eyes widened slightly, not in fear, but in recognition. She raised a hand calmly, signaling to the two scouts to stay at ease. Then she stepped forward, moving down the hill toward Eli with slow, measured steps. When she reached him, she didn't look angry. She didn't look upset. She simply looked thoughtful. She waved him forward gently, inviting him to stand with her instead of hiding. Eli followed her to the clearing where the two scouts waited. They watched him carefully, but without hostility. Their expressions were calm, respectful. Ayanna stood beside Eli, as though she wanted to show them that he was someone she trusted. Ayanna began speaking softly in her native language. Eli didn't understand the words, but he could sense the tone. She was explaining something about him. She looked at Eli occasionally, her face calm and honest. The scouts nodded slowly. One of them smiled, a small, warm smile that eased the tension Eli didn't realize he had been holding. The other scout placed a hand over his chest in a gesture of respect. Ayanna turned to Eli and took a quiet breath. She seemed to gather her thoughts, carefully, before speaking. "I trust you," she said gently. Eli didn't know what to reply. He waited, giving her space. She pointed at the scouts and said softly, "They are from my people. They have been waiting for me." "They." Eli nodded. He had suspected something like this, but hearing it made everything clearer. Ayanna continued, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "I came to this place on purpose. I needed to know where people were going, what roads were used, and where it was safe for my people to move. I was not taken. I allowed myself to go because I had to learn certain things." Eli absorbed her words slowly. Ayanna had come willingly, not as someone trapped, but as someone with a mission, someone brave and strong enough to face unfamiliar places. She looked at him with gentle eyes. I did not tell you because I did not know if you would understand, but you showed me kindness I did not expect. She paused again, her voice softening. I am grateful. Eli felt warmth spread through him. He gave a light nod, letting her know he wasn't upset. He didn't feel betrayed. He felt honored that she trusted him enough to finally share the truth. Ayanna continued, speaking more quietly now. I have been leaving small signs. My people saw them. They came tonight to tell me it is almost time for them to move again. The scouts stepped forward, making a gentle gesture of farewell toward Ayanna. Then they disappeared silently into the night, blending with the land as if they were part of it. Ayanna and Eli stood alone under the soft evening sky. The air felt different, filled with understanding, with truth, with something unspoken that connected them more deeply. Eli waited for her to say more if she wished. Ayanna looked toward the hills, then at Eli. Her voice was calm but carried a hidden weight. I did not mean to hide things. I only needed to protect my people. But now you know. Eli nodded again. He didn't need long explanations. He understood her heart, more through her actions than her words. They walked back to the ranch together in silence, the soft night air wrapping around them. Ayanna walked closer to Eli than she had before. Not out of fear, but comfort, trust. When they reached the cabin, Ayanna paused at the doorway. She looked up at the stars for a long moment, then whispered, Thank you for letting me stay, for being patient, for not asking too much. Eli gave her a gentle smile. You're welcome, he said softly. Inside the cabin, Ayanna sat in her usual corner, but tonight her posture was different. Her back still rested against the wall, but her eyes were softer, her shoulders less tense. She no longer felt like a visitor. She felt safe. Eli stepped outside, watching the sky. He thought of the scouts, of Ayanna's secret, and of the quiet strength she carried. He felt humbled by her trust, and grateful that she had chosen to share even a small part of her story. What he didn't know was that the biggest part of her story, and the hardest choice, was still ahead. And the next days would change both their lives in ways neither of them could yet imagine. The next morning, the sun rose calmly over Eli's ranch, painting the land with soft colors that warmed the wooden fences and gently touched the tops of the trees. But this morning felt different from all the others. Eli could feel a quiet heaviness in the air, like something important was waiting just beyond the horizon. Ayanna stepped out of the cabin shortly after sunrise. Her eyes were calm, but Eli sensed a new sadness behind them, something she had not shown before. She stood for a long time in front of the cabin, letting the early breeze move gently through her hair. She looked toward the hills again, the same way she always did. But this time, her gaze held a deeper meaning. Eli joined her outside, standing beside her without a word. He learned long ago that silence could be kinder than questions. After a moment, Ayanna turned her head slightly and offered him a soft smile. It was a small smile, but filled with warmth and gratitude. You are kind, she said quietly. Eli didn't know how to reply, so he just nodded. His heart felt heavier than usual. He had known that her stay on the ranch might not be forever, but he had grown used to her presence, the way she walked beside him, the way she studied the land, the way she made even quiet moments feel full. Ayanna walked to the corral and brushed one of the horses, her movements slow and thoughtful. She touched the horse's mane gently, as though memorizing the feeling. Eli watched her from a distance. He felt something soft twist inside him. He didn't want her to leave, but he also didn't want to hold her back from wherever she truly belonged. Later that day, Ayanna asked Eli to walk with her toward the hill behind the ranch. They walked side by side, neither saying much. The air was warm, and the soft rustle of grass filled the silence between them. When they reached the top of the hill, Ayana stopped and looked around. "This place is peaceful," she said softly. Eli nodded. "I'm glad you felt that here." Ayana took a long breath, as if gathering strength. "My people, they came to meet me, because it is time for them to move again. They want me with them." Eli expected those words, but hearing them still hurt in a quiet, gentle way. He lowered his gaze for a moment. Ayana noticed. She stepped closer, her voice softer now. "I did not want to leave without telling you. You have given me a place to rest. You treated me with respect. You expected nothing in return. You reminded me that kindness still exists in this wide world." Eli looked at her, unsure what to say. He wasn't good with words, but his eyes said what his heart couldn't. Ayana continued, her tone filled with calm honesty. "My people are my family. I must go with them. But leaving this place, leaving your kindness behind, it is not easy." Eli swallowed slowly, feeling a lump in his throat. "I understand," he said quietly. And he did. Ayana belonged with her people, not in a life that forced her to be something she was not. They walked back toward the cabin, both deep in thought. The day passed gently, filled with soft, unspoken emotions. Ayana helped Eli prepare dinner and washed the dishes afterward. She moved calmly, but each action felt like a goodbye. When night came, Ayana sat in her usual corner, but her posture had changed. She didn't sit with her back tightly against the wall like before. She sat comfortably, almost peacefully, as though her heart had found balance between two worlds. Eli stepped outside and gazed at the stars. He wondered how empty the ranch would feel once she left. For years, silence had been his friend. But now, a different kind of silence waited, a heavier kind. The next morning, Ayana rose early and stood near the edge of the field, facing the hills. Eli approached quietly. She turned to him with a gentle look. "They will come for me today," she said. Eli nodded, trying to keep his expression steady. "I hope you stay safe." Ayana touched her hand to her heart. "Your kindness will travel with me." Before Eli could respond, he heard soft footsteps approaching from the distance. 3 figures appeared between the trees, the same scouts from before, along with another person who looked older, wise, and calm. The group approached with respectful nods. Ayana stepped forward to greet them. They spoke quietly in their own language, their words flowing with familiarity and warmth. Eli watched from a few steps away, feeling both glad for her and sad for himself. Ayana then turned back toward Eli. "I must go now," she said softly. Eli nodded, unable to find words. He wished he could tell her how grateful he was for her presence, how much he admired her strength, how deeply he respected her. But Eli had never been someone who expressed emotions easily. "You're welcome here anytime," he said, his voice low but sincere. Ayana's expression softened. She stepped closer and held out a small, carved object, smooth and shaped like a leaf, with delicate patterns etched into its surface. "This is for you," she said. "It carries the mark of my people. Keep it close. It means friendship and a promise." Eli took the talisman carefully. It felt warm in his hand, filled with meaning he didn't fully understand yet. Ayana looked at him for a long moment, long enough for memory to form. Then, she smiled gently, stepped back, and turned toward her people. As she walked away, Eli felt something in his chest tighten, but he also felt a strange peace. Ayana was where she belonged, and the time she had spent on his ranch had changed him, too. Within moments, Ayana and her people disappeared into the hills, moving with grace and quiet unity. The ranch suddenly felt larger, quieter, and somehow emptier. Eli walked slowly back to the cabin, the talisman still held in his hand. He sat on the porch, looking out at the land that had once felt perfectly complete, with only him and his horses. Now he realized that even quiet lives could feel fuller when shared, even briefly. Days passed, and Eli returned to his routines. He fed the horses, repaired fences, and rode across the land. But he kept the talisman in his pocket every day. Sometimes he touched it gently, remembering Ayana's calm voice, the way she looked at the horizon, and the trust she had placed in him. One late afternoon, Eli rode into town for supplies. The town square was busy with people talking loudly, children running around, and travelers coming and going. But something felt different today. A group of visitors was speaking with the sheriff, asking questions. Eli didn't pay much attention until the sheriff raised his hand and called out, "Anyone seen a young Apache girl? She left town days ago." Eli froze. The sheriff explained that officials wanted to ask her questions about where she had come from. The crowd murmured, unsure of the details. Eli said nothing. He felt a protective warmth rise in him, like a quiet shield around his memories of Ayana. He bought his supplies quickly and returned to the ranch. He didn't want trouble to find its way toward Ayana or her people. That night, after the sky had filled with stars, Eli sat on the porch, thinking quietly. Then he heard a soft sound, a gentle footstep behind him. He turned, startled, and saw Ayana standing a few feet away. Her expression was calm but urgent. Her breathing slightly quickened, as though she had come a long distance. "They are looking for me," she said softly. "I had to warn you." Eli stood up, surprised and relieved. "I'm glad you're safe," he said. Ayana gave a small, grateful smile. "I came because you once helped me without asking anything." She stepped closer and placed her hand gently over the talisman he carried. "Keep this," she whispered. "And remember, kindness returns." Then, as quietly as she had arrived, Ayana stepped back into the darkness. Before leaving, she looked at him one last time, her eyes full of gratitude, and something deeper, something like a promise. She disappeared into the night, moving with the same grace she always had. Eli stood there a long time, letting the night breeze wash over him. He felt no loneliness this time. Instead, he felt a quiet strength, as though a part of Ayana's courage now lived in him too. The ranch was peaceful again, but different, full of memories, full of meaning, full of possibilities he had never imagined before. With the talisman in his hand, Eli stepped into the dawn of a new chapter, knowing that life, like the open land, carried endless stories waiting to unfold.